Hi everyone, my name's Ella and welcome to 100 Stories Deep. Today I'm going to be reading An Eye That Sees by Hanan al-Shaykh. And I came across this story when reading through this collection called The Things I Would Tell You, British Muslim Women Write. And I just really liked the way in which it really beautifully weaves together ideas around cultural heritage and language and ways of seeing. In the context of being an immigrant in Britain desiring to connect with the homeland. So here goes. An Eye That Sees. A voice rang out, loud and tuneful, through the Victoria and Albert Museum. The visitors froze, puzzled. They had never heard such a strange melody. They reacted as though a bird had just landed on their heads. It was the attendant. He stood in the middle of the gallery, his eyes closed, his head swaying from side to side, his hands clutching his heart as though afraid it might fly away. Usually a shadowy presence, a figure of unobtrusive authority, suddenly appeared before them as a man of flesh and blood. In his early days at the job, Tarek had heartily greeted each visitor as they entered and had taken it upon himself to accompany them as they wandered around the gallery. But before long, his supervisor had asked him to keep his distance. People had complained of feeling followed, monitored. He was to stay in his corner and only intervene if there was a specific reason. To ask someone to lower their voice, silence their mobile phone, refrain from leaning against the exhibits, or put away their sandwiches. On the whole, he compiled, except for the odd moment when he couldn't resist telling an old man that he reminded him of an uncle back home, or remarking on the coldness of the weather. When he had first come to Britain, 10 years before, Tarek would invariably introduce himself by telling the story of Tariq ibn Ziyad, the general who had led the Islamic conquest of Andalusia, and after whom both he and the mountain of Gibraltar were named. Years of seeing eyes glaze over went by before he finally understood that the British didn't care, and he stopped taking such pride in his name. In the face of this indifference, he tried to content himself, instead, with the fact that his one dream of life in Britain had, at least, come true. He had grown up hearing his father and the village elders speak with envy about those who had left Yemen and made a life for themselves in Europe or the Arabian Gulf. Time and time again he heard them say, "A young man who stays in this country won't find a thing to eat but flies, won't even find a shroud to cover him when they lay him to rest in the earth." Tarek had escaped this fate. He had left his job at the Yemeni airline in Sana'a and after talking to a customer who boasted to Tarek that he could earn in just a few days in the UK what amounted to Tarek's monthly salary in Yemen. The last ticket Tarek issued was his own. After a great deal of effort, he had managed to secure the necessary papers and was awarded leave to remain in the UK and permission to work. He began drifting from job to job, from a metals factory in Sheffield to a hospital in Hackney, until his Egyptian flatmate suggested he try his luck at the V&A, where he himself worked as a handyman, hanging pictures and moving objects to and from storage. The position came to him on a plate of gold, as they would have said at home, and Tarek became a museum attendant. It was a neat, respectable job, and he was proud that it meant he didn't need to work with his hands. As far as those back home were concerned, this was as good as being a company director. Besides, the role offered plenty of time for quiet contemplation. Over the course of the following months, he reduced himself, as requested, to a set of ears and a pair of eyes. Tarek busied himself with adding and subtracting, comparing his earnings and expenses, brooding over what he wanted to buy and what he had bought and regretted. He calculated the sum he had left over to send to his parents in Yemen, and thought of the special massage chair that might help ease his father's rheumatism. Would it be possible to ship it over? And if so, how would they manage to squeeze it along the narrow alleyway leading to their home? Or, for that matter, through the tiny front door? Should he go home for the holidays, he wondered. There were rumours things in Yemen were becoming more unstable. Might they become so dangerous that they would shut down flights altogether? Perhaps he should devote some of his time off to finding a bride instead. His Somali friend Ahmed, a bus driver, had told him about a promising young woman he'd met who was single. She worked at a post office and greeted him ever so politely as she got on the bus every day. If he weren't married himself, Ahmed said, he'd be tempted to ask for her hand. Tarek didn't get to meet anyone through work. The women at the museum, employees and visitors alike, whether foreigners or Arabs, came from a completely different world. They were the sort of women who walked around in spindly heels that looked like the twigs Tarek used to clean his teeth. He could sooner reach the stars than talk to a woman like that. Life here was expensive too. Even a sip of water came at a price. His Egyptian friend bemoaned the fact that the V&A was not more like the Antiquities Museum in Cairo. If you worked there, he claimed, you could make double your wages by hustling the tourists. Threaten them with grave consequences if they take a photograph, then whisper that you're willing to turn a blind eye should they extend you a handful of cash. Or, if you spot someone with a keen interest in mummies, offer to show her some special specimens that are not on public display. Then lead her to the back room housing a few bird or dog remains. Today his train of thought had been abruptly derailed when a woman with familiar features had entered the museum, followed by a television crew. She walked up to one of the paintings on display and contemplated it briefly before turning to the camera. A man handed her a microphone and proceeded to ask her a question in English. She answered in classical Arabic, but a few words slipped out in Yemeni dialect. Tarek inched closer to hear. When I was a little girl, there was one mirror in our house. I would gaze into it for hours. My mother tried to wrest me away. She used to say, "If you keep this up, that mirror will swallow you whole." One day I was helping her bake some bread, and I spilled a little salt. She was furious. She slapped me hard and said, "On the day of judgment, God will make you pick up these grains, one by one, with your eyelashes." And it was that threat, that gloating threat, that made hot tears rush to my eyes, and not the slap at all. I stared long and hard at those grains through blurry eyes. Slowly my vision cleared, and I burst out, "If God is so big and has to take care of the whole universe all the time, will he really be so worried about a few spilled grains of salt?" A realisation began to crystallise within me. I began to understand why I kept gazing into the mirror that way. I was asserting my right to look, really look, to delve into the world around me and ask questions, even if those questions made people turn away in anger or apathy or fear. Questions big and small, about boys and girls, about our life and traditions, about nature and the meaning of it all. Once, when I had been repeatedly shushed, I found myself yelling, not only at my mother, but at everyone, including my younger sister, who was in the garden playing with one of our goats. Why are we created with eyes then? Isn't it so we can see? And with the greatest urgency I rushed to draw an eye, as if it were a matter of life or death. That eye sought to expose what others tried to obscure, what everyone tried to hide from me for fear that I would break the rules, step outside the bounds of the familiar. But the tighter the chokehold on me grew, the more I rebelled by drawing eyes everywhere. On my hands, on my legs, on my clothes and schoolbooks, on the chairs and walls and bedspreads. Tarek's heart began to hammer in his chest. He almost cried out, "I know you! I know who you are! You're Aisha!" The Englishman broke in with another question. "Why do you use henna in your paintings? Are oils not available in Yemen?" The painter smiled. "Painting materials are available in the capital, Sana'a. But henna is an essential part of my culture and upbringing, of our daily rituals. Plus, I find it has beautiful colours and a powerful, evocative smell." The attendant's trembling heart could not resist coming closer and closer to the woman from his homeland, to the girl he had once seen squatting in the dirt 15 years ago. It was said at the time that she had lost her mind, mixing henna incessantly and painting eyes day and night on anything within reach, even rocks and trees. One neighbour warned the others not to hang their clothes outside to dry, after coming out of her house to find her freshly laundered sheets staring back at her. Others whispered that the girl was possessed. She was not drawing eyes, but cryptic signs. Tarek had been intrigued by these rumours. He recalled how he had made his way to her house on the outskirts of the neighbouring village. He wanted to lay his eyes on her, and if her beauty appealed to him, he had resolved to ask for her hand and break her free of the black magic. He remembered now he found her scribbling eyes on pebbles and in the dirt, and when he crept closer and looked up, straight into his eyes, she had smiled and asked, "Who are you?" In panic, he scrambled backwards and fled. A normal girl would never initiate a conversation with a boy like that. Once at a safe distance, he looked over his shoulder to see her mother dragging her back into the house and raining down blows. When he later heard that she had disappeared, run away, or maybe been killed, he blamed himself terribly that he hadn't whisked her away that day. But soon, leaving his village for the city, for university and a new life, he began to forget. She looked younger than him now, tall and willowy, even though they were both in their 30s. The years had not been so kind to him. They had stripped away his hair and puffed up his paunch. How incomprehensibly strange that they should be here now in the land of the English, her mysterious eyes on display in a museum, revered as art, and he responsible for guarding it. Tarek waited until she had finished her interview, then approached her, hand outstretched. "I'm from Yemen, from your hometown actually. I just want to say that our pride in you is bigger than this museum. 1,000 congratulations." She shook his hand, briefly. "You're so lucky to be living in this oasis of knowledge and beauty," she said politely. "Or do you get tired of seeing the same things every day?" An image of Tipu's tiger sinking its teeth into a British soldier sprang to mind. The wooden statue with its striped tail was the one piece that had caught his attention since he started working at the museum 6 years ago. Not least because on the tiger's face were inscribed the Arabic words, Asad Allah, the Lion of God. The tiger once used to produce horrifying mechanical shrieks and moans. More than once he had seen little children squirming out of their parents' grasp to run to it delightedly. No, I don't get bored. I move to a different room every day. Anyway, my name is Tarek, and I'd be very happy to take you on a special tour of the museum and maybe show you some of the things that are not on display. My colleague is in charge of the warehouse. Do you live in London? Let me give you my number. No, I live in Aden. I'm just visiting. He watched her press the digits into her mobile phone. Bye, Tarek. As she smiled and shook his hand, he realised he would never hear from her. He found himself standing alone in front of her painting. It was bigger than all the others. In the centre of the canvas was an eye the size of the earth. The smell of henna suddenly filled his nostrils. Hanoun, they called it in Yemen. She of tender heart. A familiar scene from his childhood crept unbidden into his mind. His mother filling a large tub with hot water and henna and submerging herself in it, her skin turning from white to gold. The eye drew him in, and he basked in the warmth of the Yemeni sun. Its veins were the tremors on a heart monitor, inscriptions in Aisha's secret language. He read, "The eye is the gateway to the soul. The eye is insight. The eye is exploration. The ignorant are blind even if they see. The learned see even if they are blind." He understood now that those villagers had been right, in a way. Aisha was enchanted, enchanting. As he wandered from one room to another with Aisha's eye, he saw the treasures of the museum anew. Its pupil, crimson, was life-pumping blood, led him through an oasis of knowledge and beauty, to look and explore, to feel and wonder, and to remember. The antique gilded candelabra were the flickering fireflies that dotted the Yemeni night. The ivory comb was the one his grandmother used to tug through his little sister's tangled hair. A sword of gold echoed the janbia, the curved dagger Yemeni wore tucked in their belts. Everything before him, hand-woven rugs and lush textiles, wood inlaid with mother of pearl, pottery engraved with delicate shapes. All this, which was considered part of Western heritage, he had seen before in the homes and buildings and mosques of Yemen. Raphael's image of Jesus and the miraculous drought of fish rang instant bells. A parallel legend that told of answered sea prayers of a Yemeni sheikh. When he saw a tiny box containing a replica of a skeleton to remind human beings of the day of reckoning, a coloured clay bowl to serve soup to a new mother moments after childbirth, a glass bottle that, if broken, would bury its owner under a hailstorm of disaster. He thought, so many countries scattered across the earth. How is it that folklore is almost one? Tarek heaved a sigh. An old song bubbled up from deep within, and he let it take him over. Oh, Hannah, dear Hannah, oh drops of morning dew. My sweetheart's eyes are a window that lets the breeze sing through. A hand clamped down on his shoulder. He opened his eyes with a start to find his supervisor pulling him to a corner of the room, asking in hushed, hurried tones, "What's going on here?" "Sorry, I don't know what happened. It's like that I felt for the first time this place. It reminded me of home." You still have to keep it together at all times. You know very well how we react when a visitor raises their voice, don't you? Yes, I asked them to stop and call in security if necessary. All right then, so you know the rules. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that story. Can you think of a time when you have been to a museum or art gallery that's really encouraged you to look at certain artefacts or objects in a totally new light? Or is there a specific artwork or artefact that has made you look at the world in a totally different way? Yeah, if you'd like to share your comments in the comment section below, that'd be great. And if you would like to listen to more stories in the 100 Stories Deep series, then don't forget to subscribe using the subscribe button below. So thanks for watching and see you again soon. Bye!